The conference is actually built around the fact that the IPSASB is having the first of its 4 meetings this year in Washington, and we felt it was a really good opportunity to get together with the other international organisations that are based here, really to build contacts, renew relationships and so on. Certainly in doing that, it's a great opportunity to celebrate 20 years of the IPSAS programme and reflect on what we've achieved. But then I think the more important thing here is actually what the standards can actually be used for in terms of stronger public financial management. And that certainly is important from a board perspective, because we're just about to start work on our strategy for 2019 through to 2023. And also I think it's important for the organisations here to understand what we can offer in terms of their work programmes, and really to think about how we can work together so that the sum of the whole is really greater than the sum of the parts. So governments, I think the sovereign debt crisis really showed us that not all governments are equally creditworthy. I think it also showed the way in which problems with government finance are much more pervasive than if you have problems with an individual corporate entity. And it's not just in terms of the finances for the government, it's how the stock markets work in a country, and it's also how individual citizens actually live their lives and the impact that that has on them. So you can have some very negative effects. But on the positive side, I think there's now research which shows us that there is a strong correlation between transparency and lower levels of debt, and also between debt service costs and transparency. So there are some positives here. I think if you're really going to actually maximise the benefits of the credibility that increased transparency gives you, then you also need global standards, and that's international public sector accounting standards. That credibility really requires comparability that the IPSAS give you. So during our first 20 years, we've actually produced 40 accrual standards covering many areas of government finance, as well as some recommended practice guidelines. I think that in itself is an achievement, but one of the standout achievements really is the development of a conceptual framework for public sector financial reporting. That really has set the framework for our work going forwards. I think also now the increasing engagement with stakeholders is really important. That certainly influenced our work programme, and I think the fact that that actually is starting to deliver what our stakeholders want is actually shown in the increasing levels of accrual adoption around the world, and particularly if you go to those countries that haven't had a strong standard setting function before, they're actually now seeing, if they move to accrual, IPSAS are actually the standards that they should be applying. Going forward, really, at the moment we've got a very big work programme which is actually addressing the big ticket public sector issues that previously we'd had to wait and get our conceptual framework in place before we actually addressed. So we're now looking at things like social benefits, heritage and so on, which are real issues both in accounting but also policy terms for governments around the world. So that's certainly one area of challenge. Second area of challenge, which is a good one to have, is that as more governments are actually moving to accrual around the world, we really need to actually move from the sort of just purely setting standards to really engaging with our stakeholders, both the international organisations such as the World Bank, IMF, OECD, but also individual countries, and making sure that actually we're addressing their problems. And then I think that feeds into the development of our work plan and strategy for the 5 years from 2019 onwards, where we need to get that balance between addressing public sector issues, and there still are public sector issues like natural resources, sovereign powers and so on that we need to address, whilst making sure that we maintain, even increase convergence with international financial reporting standards. The information is also useful for policymakers at the macro level, so the links with government finance statistics are really important. I think we've also got an issue just in terms of communication about the value of financial statements and making sure that they're accessible to the citizens, to you and I. And then I think finally, really it's a question of actually what's the board's role in terms of promoting adoption and implementation. And again, that comes back to us working more closely with all the other global organisations in terms of really ensuring that there is strong public financial management around the world, which is what we really all want.